Hello and welcome to another episode of the Popcorn Conspiracy. I'm Dave G, and joining me today is my co-host.
Hello everybody, I'm Kyle.
And today we're going to be taking a look at one of the first big blockbusters of this year. We're taking a look at Bad Boys for Life. Yes, it's 17 years since the last movie, but the third Bad Boys movie that it seems to have been talked about for the last decade has finally arrived. And I got to say that this movie actually kind of like flows on from the last two quite well. Marcus, played by Martin Lawrence, and Mike, played by Will Smith, are still Miami cops. Marcus, though, however, is thinking about starting to wind down because he's just become a grandfather, whereas Mike still really wants to keep on going with being a cop, and he's kind of a little bit offended that Marcus wants to retire. But then a big event happens that completely changes everything. A killer arrives in town, desperate to try and get revenge for his family, and he starts off by shooting Mike. Now, this comes as an absolute surprise for everybody around, including Captain Howard, played by Joe Pantoliano, and this changes the whole aspect of this movie, because much to Mike's surprise, Marcus still decides that he wants to retire, which completely offends Mike even more, and suddenly he finds himself having to work with a new team of detectives who do things very, very differently to the way he does to try and catch the person who has tried to kill him before they can actually try and kill anybody else involved with this case. Mate, I gotta say, this movie absolutely blew me away. Like, I absolutely loved it, but I'm gonna start off by asking, what did you think of Bad Boys for Life?
Oh, I loved it, man. I loved it too. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the original two movies. They're two films that I think they really show... I point to them and think they really do show Michael Bay can make a coherent, crowd-pleasing action film. And I think they both came out they predated the whole Michael Bay hate wagon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were before Pearl Harbor. Well, the first one definitely was. I think the second one was before Pearl Harbor. It was before... he really became known as this really bad director because of the Transformers films, which I still think is really unfair because he has made good films since then. But I really did enjoy those first two films, and so I've been waiting a long time for this third movie. Like, yeah, as you say, 17 years since the last film. It's crazy, and I was worried that for various reasons about that this movie might be failing because of the lack of Michael Bay in the director's chair. Also, Joe Carnahan, another director who I like, he pulled out because of he was going to direct it, and he pulled out because of delays. And instead, this movie is directed by two relatively unknown filmmakers. But I really enjoyed this. I think it's a really enjoyable movie, and it works well as a third installment in this franchise. And it's a lot more faithful to the original two, even though it's almost 20 years past the second movie. It's a lot more faithful as a continuation than a lot of other sequels have been. Like, usually they drop a lot of cast members, and they just kind of, as long as they've got the big star in the movie, it doesn't matter, you know. Like, I think when they make Die Hard, usually with most of the Die Hard movies, actually, they kind of just drop all the supporting characters from the previous films.
Yeah.
Just that as an example. This one, yeah, even though it's 17 years later, there's a lot of returning cast members, there's a lot of fan service, and I really did enjoy it. I think it really does stand up with the previous two films.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking to a lot of people before we went into this movie, and everybody seemed to have this strange thought that this movie was going to become an absolute train wreck. There was people highlighting like Martin Lawrence's weight, people highlighting the fact that, oh, this movie is so bad that Michael Bay doesn't want to be involved with it, like, because they did have like these fresh young directors. And when I say fresh young directors, I should point out that it's not like they've just gone and got a couple of film students like to to step up and make these movies. These guys have been making feature films in America since 2014, so it's not like they've just gone and grabbed a couple of guys that have just are fresh out of film school or anything like that. In fact, I think probably these guys, it actually works in a sense that these guys did actually direct this film, because I think if Michael Bay had directed it, there might have been, as you said, people unfairly look at Michael Bay's movies these days.
Yeah.
And I think having that Michael Bay shadow over the movie might have actually caused people to go in with an even more negative point of view. And, like, these two guys who directed this film, they just come off a really, really successful film. They directed a movie called Black, which had done so well on the festival circuit. Like, I think it picked up like something like 5 or 6 awards, including like winning like different festivals right across the world. Like the Black Film Festival in Montreal, they picked up Best Feature. Their other movie that they made just before that, it also picked up awards at Palm Springs. So they were obvious, and Toronto as well. Black won the Toronto Film Festival. So they'd kind of been on the radar for a while. Like, we talk about the blacklist for scripts that people want to pick up. These were directors that I'm pretty sure the major studios wanted to try and get involved with the project, and considering the nature of the movies that they'd shot in the past, Bad Boys was actually probably the right fit for them. I'm sure even like probably Will Smith probably would have looked at their past work and thought they were perfect for this role as well. So I think the fact that people are kind of like referring to them as fresh and green and all this, I think it's actually a little bit incorrect. They're award-winning filmmakers, just haven't made big international movies before.
Yeah, like I did know of their movie Black. I just didn't know of them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until actually after this movie came out, after this Bad Boys movie came out, and I thought, oh well, they actually did a good job, and then looking them up, and then I realized, oh, okay, they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the Michael Bay shadow over this movie is kind of weird, because everybody kind of like seemed to make the comment about, oh, Michael Bay wasn't interested in doing it, but he's actually in the movie. Like, he appears in the movie, and now there's talk that he's going to be the guy behind number 4, which they're like rushing into now. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just that there was a conflict with his schedule or something like that, because, yeah, it seems pretty harsh that people are saying like that Michael Bay didn't want to have anything to do with this movie when the guy makes a cameo in the film. Like, if he didn't want to have anything to do with the movie, then there's no way he would have agreed to do a cameo. Like, I really do think that perhaps the issue here was more so that he had a conflict with like a project he was working on and couldn't work on the film or something. He
just had that huge Netflix movie Six Underground with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling there's probably, like, even though this movie took 17 years to make, and the entire Transformers franchise that happened in that time, just when they actually finally got around to making this movie, he was too busy to do it at the time. They had to hand the reins over to somebody else.
Yeah, they also had some great writers on this as well. One of my favorite writers is actually on this film, and I didn't realize until I checked the other day. Joe Carnahan, who has made some really smart films over the years, like Smoking Aces. He wrote The Grey. There was so much stuff about this movie that people could have looked at a positive of rather than a negative. And like you said, even the fact that the 2 stars come back, because Martin Lawrence could easily have said, you know what, I'm too old for this. I don't want to do this movie. And the studio could probably have happily have teamed Will Smith up with Kevin Hart, or teamed Will Smith up with The Rock or anything like that, and to make this movie. But yeah, both the lead guys believed in this movie and came back. But not only that, but you had people, like I was saying before, like the dude who plays the captain came back to make this movie. They really didn't do too much to ripple the waters of the original films with this at all. And so many times these days we watch these reboot movies, and the biggest criticism is it's so far-fetched from what the original fans knew and loved that they don't want to have anything to do with it. Like, a classic example for that, for me, was Baywatch. Like, they talk about, they're going to reboot Baywatch with a movie. They end up making a movie that pretty much made fun of the original television series, and there was no way original fans of the series were going to like that movie, because it's like, you're basically making fun of something that people really, really like. And then, like, you think of movies like Prometheus, where they've tried to do, like, the Alien reboot, and people are kind of like, yeah, I'm not 100% sure that I like that kind of thing. Whereas this film here, it feels like it could have been made, like, just a couple of years after number 2. There is such a very little ripple in the water for the original fans that I'm pretty sure original fans of this series are going to love it.
Yeah. There's definitely a good amount of nostalgia with callbacks of actors that have been in the previous movies. Like, I can't remember the character's name, but he was a teenage kid who came to date Marcus's daughter in Bad Boys 2. And he was just in it for one scene, and the Mike and Marcus kind of torture him a bit, like threaten him as he's going to take Marcus's daughter out on a date. And I don't know if I've seen him in anything else, but he shows up in this, and he and Marcus's daughter now have a child, and they're getting married. I can't remember if I saw Theresa Randall in the movie as Marcus's wife. I know that she retired from acting about 10 years ago, but I had read that she did come back for this movie. And as you say, Michael Bay isn't directing, but he is in it. He does have a notable cameo in it. I did miss there was a Latino duo of cops that Marcus and Mike had a lot of banter with in the first 2 films. One of those actors had actually passed away in between the second and third films, so I guess they might have just thought that bringing only one of them back would have been just too sad.
Yeah.
But so that was a pity. But other than that, yeah, it's like I said, for it to be 17 years after the last film, it still managed to stay true to it really well.
Yeah.
A lot of it also still has to do with the chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Like, they caught lightning in a bottle 25 years ago with the first Bad Boys movie, and they still have that magic that makes the both of them so fun to watch. Yeah. And they're a lot older now. It's 25 years later from the original movie, and it doesn't shy away from that in this movie. Like, it really does. They do deal with the idea that, yeah, these guys, they're a lot older. They're not bad boys anymore. They're not boys. They're men in their 50s or something now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it even though it was, I was saying to you a day or two ago, it was really weird the kind of release schedule of this franchise. Even though, like, it's a franchise that everyone seems to like, the first movie came out in '95. The second movie didn't come out for 8 years after that, and this one came out 17 years after the second movie. And now they look like they're going to make the fourth movie, like, as quick as possible. So maybe in a year or two. So
yeah.
It's just kind of amusing how different the spacing between this franchise has been.
Yeah, it is weird, because I remember this third movie being talked about now for over a decade, and like, it seemed to be the one that every year they would kind of be the rumor about, they're going to do another one, and you never really knew whether or not it was just a fake rumor, or whether stuff wasn't aligning, like whether Will Smith wasn't committing to do another one, or whether like, I'm pretty sure Martin Lawrence would have jumped at the opportunity, but, like, yeah, Will Smith was pretty busy with other films and everything that he was making, and it seemed a bit weird at the time that, like, this rumor would come about every year, but then nothing would happen. And then I think it was about 2 years ago they announced that Martin Lawrence and Will Smith had signed on to do 2 more Bad Boys movies, and this time it actually seemed to jump straight into it. Like, Will Smith was posting on Instagram and saying that he was